Hello! Welcome back for another Merry Musing. We're on week 2, and during week 1, we talked about how Mary says, "How can this be?" when the angel Gabriel appears to her with the news that she will bear Christ to the world, and how that is a phrase of holy curiosity, something that we can all manifest and work on fostering in our own lives. Today, we hear Mary's response after her question in continued conversation with the angel Gabriel. And she says in Luke 1 still, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord." Two words stand out to me from this phrase that I want to talk about today. The first being behold. Now, doing a little bit more research, I learned that behold is kind of an equivalent to here I am, which is a phrase we hear when God calls people and they respond to him in the scriptures, quite often, actually. We hear it in the story of Abram, who we also talked about last week, when he is called by God to leave his homeland and promised by God that he'll have many, many descendants. He has to take this giant leap of faith and leave all that he's known in order to allow God to work. And Abram says, "Here I am." Moses, too, standing in front of a bush on fire, says, "Here I am," in response to God. And we also hear it in the story of Samuel, who is called by God as a young man in the middle of the night and pesters Eli a few times before Eli realizes and counsels him to respond, "Here I am," to the Lord. So we have these beautiful messages of our church kind of preparing for this ultimate "Behold, here I am" from Mary, who will continue the salvation that these men have started and bring it to its fulfillment in bringing Christ, our salvation, to the world. The second word that stands out to me from this phrase, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord," is the word handmaid. And I hadn't really contemplated what that would be, a handmaid of the Lord. But the handmaid would be the lowliest of the household servants. This would be the person who had to be ready to respond as soon as their mistress would call for them. They had to be at hand. And that's what made them so lowly. They had to have no other priorities. Well, for Mary to call herself the handmaid of the Lord is to show us her humility, but also to show us what it means to be poor in spirit. The first beatitude that Jesus speaks of in the Sermon on the Mount is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And often people interpret that as a negative thing. But if Jesus is calling it blessed, we have to realize that poor in spirit means to be fully dependent, to truly rely on God and his goodness for all things. So for Mary to be able to respond with this assent to God's will is for her to have no other burdens tying her down. She probably has her own will and her own desires and hopes for this life, but that's not what she clings to. And therefore, she's truly poor in spirit, ready to put down anything else and to respond to the will of God that he's asking of her in his life, in her life. And this is what shows us that Mary is a person of radical acceptance, our kind of second virtue in our Mary musings. The first being holy curiosity, and today, radical acceptance. I like two-word phrases for some reason. This is something she modeled to Jesus, and it's amazing. It's mind-blowing to me to think about her modeling to God Himself as He grew in wisdom what it looks like to radically accept God's will. And that goes back to, having this holy curiosity, this sense of openness to God working in our lives. But it also goes beyond that to be able to obey before you completely understand something. And we see that in the life of Jesus over and over again. Of course, in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's so stressed that he sweats blood. And he says, "If this cup can pass from me, please let it happen. Not my will, but yours be done." But we also see Jesus act as this kind of lowly servant before that when he washes the feet of his apostles. And this is what it looks like to be a handmaid, to set aside pride, to set aside our own desires, and to be ready to serve God. If you haven't seen The Chosen yet, may I just recommend the series The Chosen. It's a free app. You can watch it online as well, and it's this beautiful series on the life of Christ. And in season 2, which is coming out slowly right now, episode 3, we see Mary in a moment, not from scripture, but just kind of imagined by the writers, that kind of foreshadows the washing of the feet that Jesus will do later in his life. And I also believe that's a moment that shows how she is a handmaid of the Lord and how she models that to her son. So I'd like to leave you with a question, as I did last week. The question for you and for myself is, where can you more readily be at hand for the Lord? Where can you be so poor in spirit, so dependent on Him and His goodness, that you respond so willingly as a handmaid to God? I hope you'll take some time to think about that. Please feel free to comment or respond to me by email. I love to hear back from you, and I hope you have a great day.